This is a short but scarring story nonetheless from my early childhood. I grew up in an average middle-class home in the suburbs. My sister and I were huge fans of Christmas as kids. I had to be like 7 years old when this happened because we had just moved to our new house. This is one of my earliest memories in life that I remember vividly just because of the gravity of it. On Christmas Eve, I would always have trouble sleeping, even as a young kid, just due to anticipation. I would stay up really late playing video games in my room on my old box TV. I'd play until I just fell asleep from exhaustion. This night in question, I was playing a Star Wars game for the PS1, and when I had to go to the bathroom, I turned the volume down low and quietly snuck out of my room because I knew my mom would get mad if she heard me sneaking around on Christmas Eve night. I snuck to the upstairs bathroom, and when I was done, I was quietly going back to my room when I heard the sound of the tree rustling around downstairs. My first instinct was to think, Santa. I started tiptoeing down the stairs until I got to the bottom. The sound of the rustling pine needles was louder now. I peeked around the bottom wall of the stairway into the living room. There were no lights on except for someone holding a flashlight. I could see only the person's legs as they were bent over behind the tree. There was a black bag on the floor, and this random adult man came out from behind the tree and looked at me. He looked at me and put his pointer finger up to his mouth, and he made a shushing motion with his lips. He whispered, "Yes, I'm Santa." I was old enough and smart enough to know that wasn't what the Santa I grew up knowing looked like. I started screaming for my mom and dad as loud as I could. I remember the man started freaking out, deciding whether or not to take the bag he filled with our gifts, and he ended up running away to the front door. I don't remember if he had to unlock it or if it was already unlocked or not. I just remember him leaving through the front door, and seconds later, my parents running down the stairs. I'm sure I screamed, "There was a man in here," and them seeing the black bag on the floor filled with what would have been stolen gifts proved that. Here's where my memory started getting fuzzy, so I had to ask my parents what happened next. My dad told me he went outside in his slippers and ran all over the place, ready to kill someone. Half the ornaments on the tree were taken off and in the bag. What kind of sick, evil person steals people's sentimental Christmas ornaments? According to my dad, the method in which the man broke in was the back door, which it appeared he yanked open with a crowbar due to the chipped wood. A house a few blocks away had also fallen victim to this, and it was on the news. It was most definitely the same guy. I don't remember much from when I was 7, but this is a memory that still sticks in my brain like it was only a few years ago. Ere the police station was on, I noticed that the car stopped following me. I pulled into the police. I didn't get out of my car. I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, making sure that the car didn't come in after me and that it was gone. Then, I finally went back on the road and went home. For the rest of my drive, I did not notice the car directly behind me or anything. There were a decent number of other cars on the road, but it wasn't all that busy. Eventually, I got back to my house and pulled in. My street was usually pretty quiet, but as soon as I parked my car in the driveway, my phone started to ring again. I jumped when I heard it. When I looked, it was the same number as before. I decided to answer it. When I did, I heard the same man's voice speak. He said, "You shouldn't have gone to the police station. You should have just gone home. I know where you live." This really freaked me out, but just then, things got worse. I suddenly heard a car approaching and saw headlights entering my street. I turned and ran from my house as fast as possible. I got to the door and unlocked it just as the car reached my driveway. It pulled in and parked behind my car, and I made it inside my house. I locked the door behind me. I took out my phone and called the police. Meanwhile, after parking in my driveway, I saw a man get out and start to walk to my door. I ran back into the living room, which is away from the door. The man then knocked on my front door and tried to open it. After that, he stayed on the front step, just standing there. I really wondered if that guy was crazy. He called me again, but I didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail, and he did not leave a message. The good part is that he did not attempt to break in, he just stood there right outside my front door the entire time. Finally, the police got there. They talked to the man and were able to get him to leave as well as give him a citation. I hoped that that would be enough. It was certainly one of the scariest situations in my life. That man was very sneaky. I really don't know how he got my phone number or knew where I lived. I think he waited for me around the corner of the police station or something, then kept a distance so I didn't notice him. It was dark out, so I couldn't see all the other cars very well. Either way, whatever he did, it blows my mind he was able to do it. The good news is that I haven't seen him since. On the evening of December 6, 1959, Dr. Law arrived home after a long day of work. Law was one of the most successful surgeons in the greater Los Angeles area and had even conducted speaking tours of various Ivy League universities. He was an exceptionally hard-working man, and this hard work had paid off in the form of an opulent Spanish colonial-style home in the neighborhood of Los Feliz. Law's wife Mary was hard at work decorating their home for the holidays, while their 3 children, 18-year-old Liam, 11-year-old Debbie, and 13-year-old Joseph, busied themselves with some homework before dinner. After a dinner so wholesome it could have been on the cover of a Christmas card, the children returned to their bedrooms to carry on their schoolwork while Mary retired to the master bedroom to read. Law also opted for the comfort of a good book and poured himself a drink before settling down in front of the fireplace to thumb through his copy of Dante's Divine Comedy. There he remained for the next few hours, long after his wife and children had gone to sleep. Yet instead of steadily progressing from chapter to chapter, Law was focused on one particular passage of the Divine Comedy. It was a line from Canto 1, one which read, "Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost." It's not exactly clear why the line resonated with Law so much, but as he retired to bed, he couldn't seem to shake the passage from his mind. For the next few hours, Law lay in bed, trapped somewhere between dreams and consciousness. Finally, after 4 in the morning, Law quietly climbed out of bed, crept downstairs, then walked into the family kitchen. Careful to remain as quiet as possible, he retrieved a large, well-used ball-peen hammer from a toolbox that he kept under the sink, then walked back upstairs and back into his bedroom. There he silently stood over his sleeping wife, hammer tight in his grip, possibly contemplating the enormity of his intentions for a few moments before finally deciding to strike. When he did, Law raised the hammer high into the air, then ended Mary's life with a single blow. At least, it's commonly believed that Mary died instantly because she certainly didn't make enough noise to wake up her 3 sleeping children. Even so, to ensure that she was dead, Law began to smash his wife's skull to pieces, inflicting blow after devastating blow with the flat steel of his hammer. After murdering his wife, Law crept into his eldest daughter's room, intending to execute her in the exact same manner. Yet although she appeared to be asleep, Liam had been awakened by the sound of her father opening the door and was watching him from the corner of one eye as he quietly approached her bedside and raised the hammer. As Law attempted to execute her, Liam was able to raise an arm, deflecting the initial blow and potentially saving her life. Then, as her father attempted to finish her off, she began to scream so loud that it not only roused her siblings from their slumber but also woke the neighbors on both sides of the Perelson house. To silence her, Law struck his eldest daughter several times about the head and face, but it was too late. He could already hear the sound of his youngest daughter emerging from her bedroom, seeking the source of the disturbance. Law intercepted 11-year-old Debbie before she could enter her sister's room, then guided her back to bed under the pretense that she simply had a nightmare. He'd assumed that he'd beaten Liam unconscious and that he'd be able to simply creep back in and finish her off once he dealt with young Debbie. However, reassuring his younger daughter had taken much longer than he had initially anticipated, and after walking back into Liam's room, Law found it completely empty. Liam had escaped out of an open window, carefully sliding down a section of roof before jumping to the hard concrete below. Despite a nasty sprain, adrenaline propelled Liam to the door of a horrified neighbor who was quick to respond after having already heard her screams. This neighbor then alerted emergency services, and before long, the streets of Los Feliz were awash with the red and blue lights of ambulances and police cruisers. 11-year-old Debbie had not been fooled by her father's explanations, and while he stormed about the house trying to locate her older sister, Debbie had gathered up her brother before the pair of them fled the property. Having realized his home was quickly being surrounded by police and that his children had all managed to escape, Law prepared to defend himself with deadly force. As the teams of EMTs rushed the children to a nearby hospital, the cops closed in on their home and forced their way inside. They carefully advanced from room to room, calling out to Law, terrified he was waiting to ambush them from some unseen vantage point. After gaining access to the family bedroom, the police officers found Law lying on the floor of his ensuite bathroom, having ingested a fatal dose of prescription drugs. The crime scene alone told a grisly story of inexplicable and violent madness, yet the most important question remained unanswered. Why in the world had Law done something so utterly horrifying? During the initial phase of the investigation, the police questioned the Perelson neighbors but were told that the family were close-knit, loving, and showed no visible signs of discord. However, following a search of Liam's car, they found a letter which read, "We are on the merry-go-round again, same problems, same worries, only tenfold. My parents are in a bind financially." The letter also mentioned how Liam intended to find a part-time job in order to help contribute to the family finances. Investigators began to theorize that Law had simply snapped under the pressure of their dire financial situation and had decided that taking his loved ones' lives was preferable to the misery of poverty and uncertainty. Yet the fact remained that Law neglected to leave any kind of note, and with Liam stating that her father made no attempt to explain his actions, his motivations were likely to remain a chilling mystery. The only clue Law ever gave was leaving his copy of the Divine Comedy open with that same line highlighted, "Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost." Once they were well enough, the three Perelson children were reunited, then sent out east to live with relatives. They have since dropped off the radar, and it's commonly believed they've changed their names to avoid any association with their father's crimes. Many years later, once the media firestorm had died down, the mansion was sold off at auction, with the proceeds going to settle the estate's debts and the remainder going to the children. Initially, the auctioneers were extremely skeptical that the home would sell, as they were legally obliged to inform potential buyers of the home's history. Yet to their surprise, one couple seemed very interested in purchasing the home. Julian and Emily Enriquez didn't seem in the least bit disturbed by the mansion's dark past, and their single solitary bid secured the home at an extremely reasonable price. Yet instead of making the mansion their permanent residence, The new owners only visited the home on rare occasions. Neighbors said Julian and Emily would show up in the dead of night before carrying large trunks or pieces of furniture inside. They would never sleep there and appeared to use it for nothing but storage. But some in the neighborhood began to theorize the couple's nightly activities were much more sinister. After all, why would they be so interested in purchasing a home so many believed to be haunted? When Julian and Emily Enriquez passed away in 1994, ownership of the mansion passed to their son Rudy. Neighbors had long since grown sick of how the mansion's rotting carcass dragged down nearby property values and hoped that Rudy would quickly renovate and sell the place. Yet after a few months, it appeared that Rudy was doing exactly the same thing as his parents, showing up in the dead of night, then dragging a variety of unusual-looking items up the driveway and into the house. Rudy also appeared to have enlisted the aid of a variety of unsavory-looking people, although what exactly he needed their help with remained a mystery. One neighbor claimed that after questioning a group of shady-looking visitors to the home, the group claimed that they were ghost hunters and camped in the mansion's backyard for several days while they conducted a series of paranormal surveys. The presence of the ghost hunters briefly reignited the media firestorm surrounding the Law murders, and Rudy Enriquez was forced to publicly deny that he believed the house was haunted. Yet he certainly seemed okay with granting access to those that did, which in turn was judged as being in very poor taste. To keep the old mansion rotting and abandoned was one thing, but to use it to profit from a horrifying murder was beyond the pale. The move forced Rudy to admit the opposite was true and that it was him paying for ghost hunter services, although frustratingly he refused to elaborate further. The presence of ghost hunters and the subsequent media interest seemed to solidify the home's reputation as being haunted by the spirits of Law and Mary. It became known as the Los Feliz Murder Mansion, a tourist attraction for the more macabre-minded visitors to LA. Many famous paranormal investigators have also visited the murder mansion, with some boasting of discoveries and evidence either real or imagined, often in the form of hearing voices and whispers while roaming the outside of the house. One such investigator told the press that he felt the presence of extreme energy inside the home and that a number of so-called orbs had been photographed in the mansion's upstairs bedrooms. To the skeptics among us, the presence of so-called orbs is explained by a heavy amount of dust or other such debris in the air. Naturally, being such an old derelict home, the Los Feliz mansion would have been a veritable dust trap. But there's just one problem with this explanation. In order for orbs to appear, dust needs to be thick in the air, and the only two things that can stir it up in such a way are strong exterior winds causing drafts or the physical presence of something inside the house. The paranormal investigators have claimed that they photographed the exterior of the house before they ever entered and that orbs appeared in these photographs, meaning that either strong winds had stirred up dust in the home that day or that someone or something had been moving around in the house shortly before their arrival. Whether you believe in such phenomenon or not, the reports certainly make for chilling listening, but it still seems redundant considering the abject horror of the original crime. Dr. Law's reasons for wanting to murder his wife and children remain a complete and utter mystery. It's easy to blame the family's financial problems, but such self-destructive behavior seems completely out of character for a man who so dearly cherished his hard-won success. As cryptic as it may be, I believe the best clue to Harold's mindset lies in his choice of literature during his final few hours. Dante's Divine Comedy tells the story of a single dead soul which travels through hell and purgatory before eventually reaching heaven. The soul witnesses God's divine rewards for just souls, but they also witness the horrific punishments meted out to the hordes of mortal sinners who find themselves condemned to hell. Some have suggested that Dr. Law was seeking reassurance for his actions, reasoning if it was a sin to murder them if the goal was to save them from a life of misery. But there are others who report that the passage from Canto 1, the one which seemed to hold Harold captive, was in reference to his own sanity. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward path had been lost. Harold hadn't lost his way in life. What he mourned that night was the loss of his mind. I was home alone one weekend, so my girlfriend Joy came over to spend the weekend with me. It was the middle of December and Christmas festivities were in full swing. Joy wanted to watch Christmas movies tonight, so we ordered food, drank wine, and sat by the Christmas tree in the living room watching Christmas movies. We started with the Polar Express, then we started watching Elf. We ran out of wine, so I decided I'd run to the liquor store down the block to get more. It would only take 10 minutes anyway. It was a Saturday night, so they were open later. The usual cashier was working, and I got stuck in a conversation with him like I always do whenever I go there. Mid-conversation with him, I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket. I checked my phone to see who it was. It was Joy. I interrupted the cashier, saying, "1 SEC," and I picked up. Joy sounded scared, saying she keeps hearing noises from below the living room. That would mean the crawl space. I told her it's fine, there's nothing down there. She asked me to stay on the phone with her until I got back, so I did. I walked a 5-minute walk back home, and Joy was still on the couch. She had the movie paused, still saying that she was listening for sounds. When I asked her if she heard any other sounds, she said no. She asked, "What if there's an animal down there?" I told her that's not possible, there's no openings from anywhere outside. I opened the wine bottle and we continued to watch the movie. It wasn't long after that we both heard a distinct thud type of sound from below us, from the crawl space. I looked at Joy, and she looked at me. She was right, there was something down there. I said, "Oh, there might actually be an animal down there." Once again, we paused the movie, and I went to the closet with the attic door inside. I grabbed the flashlight on the ledge and went down into the crawl space. I stayed by the crawl space door and just did a quick scan of the place. There were a million boxes down there, so a small animal could have been hiding anywhere. It smelled like piss in there, which pretty much confirmed that there was something down there. I'm not an exterminator or pest control, so there was nothing I could do about it. I told my parents about it in the family group chat and told my dad he'd have to call pest control tomorrow. Then, as I was climbing back up the stairs, I heard something from across the crawl space. I don't know what it was, but something moved. I got scared that some animal was going to run at me, so I hurried up the stairs and shut the door. There wasn't much else we could do now except just go back to the living room and finish watching the movie. After Elf ended, we went to my room and eventually went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night having to pee really badly and with a throbbing headache. I got up, opened my bedroom door, and looked down into the dark hallway. At the end of the hallway, I saw a person's silhouette. I almost screamed, but instead, I quietly closed the door and locked it. I heard footsteps coming down the hallway, and then the doorknob turned and someone tried opening the door. Then a deep, hoarse-sounding voice on the other side said, "Hello." That was when Joy started to scream. She had been woken up by my getting up, and she heard the voice too. I would have tried to calm her down, but I was scared shitless myself. I did hear footsteps walk away from the door, and so I called 911. Waiting for the cops felt like a millennium. All I know was when the cops got here, there was no one else in this house. Whoever it was had left. The smell of piss in the crawl space wasn't my imagination. There was literally a puddle of that person's piss on the ground, which is pretty disturbing because that would suggest that he had been down there for a while. While it was likely a homeless squatter, that didn't make it any less horrifying. My family didn't even believe it at first. I've never forgotten to lock the door ever again. This story took place just last year. It was in December, just a few weeks before Christmas. I live in a large neighborhood in a house with my wife and 2 young children. One evening, my wife met up with one of her best friends. Her best friend's kids are around the same ages as ours, and they all went to spend time together. My wife told me this while I was at work and asked me to set up the Christmas lights when I got home. I told her that I would do it, and I wanted to surprise the kids with them when they got home. We had gotten a little bit of snow already, but the weather wasn't too cold, so it was a good night to do it. We had several lawn decorations, but the hardest part was hanging up the lights from the roof. I would have to take out the ladder and climb up onto the roof for that. So, that day when I got home from work, almost instantly, I went to the garage and got everything that I needed. It was dark out by then, and I first set up some of the things in our front yard. Then, I got the ladder and went on top of the roof. The lights went all the way around our house on both sides, in the front and back of it. When I got around towards the back side of the house and was still on top of the roof, I heard a noise coming from below. I didn't know what it was at first, but it sounded like somebody was back there. Even though it was dark out, I had a pretty good view of my surroundings. When I looked, I finally saw that there was a man standing sort of near our house behind it. I had never seen him before, and he was not a neighbor that I was aware of. I didn't know what this guy was doing in my backyard. I saw him walk closer to me. I called out, asking who he was and what he was doing, but he didn't answer. Instead, he started running towards my ladder. It was a ways down, probably about 20 feet. There was no way that I was going to get there before him. The guy then took my ladder and knocked it down. Now I had no way of getting off the roof. Then, he walked around to the back door, which I had left unlocked. He then entered our house. I was angry but tried to remain calm. Luckily, I did have my cell phone on me. I dialed 911 and told them about what had happened. Then, I just had to wait for them to arrive and hope that the man did not destroy my house or steal anything. I yelled down to him that I called the police, hoping that it would scare him off. I really didn't hear anything, though. I wasn't sure where the guy was or what he was doing. Then, probably 2 or 3 minutes later, the guy suddenly left. He came running out of my house at full speed. He ran through the backyard and then hopped the fence, which connected my yard with my neighbor's. After leaping it, he kept running and very quickly was completely out of my sight. I was glad to see him gone and didn't notice him holding anything as he ran. He very well could have stolen something small and put it in his pocket or still damaged something, but overall, this was a relief. Just a few minutes after that, the police showed up. They were able to get my ladder and help me get down from the roof. Then they searched my house and property and said that they would look around in the nearby area for the man. I didn't have a great description of him, but I told them what I could. The crazy part is after searching the house, nothing was messed up and nothing was stolen either. That really surprised me. I still don't know why he entered my house or was even in my yard. After the police left, I finished putting my lights up but was very careful. The guy never came back. I finished on time before my wife and kids returned home. After that, nothing like that has happened since. We still live there, and I recently put out all the decorations again this year. things went much smoother. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.